name is John Robertson, and I am the branch librarian supervisor at the Warren Civic Center Library. As part of our continuing authors program at the library, we are very pleased to have with us today local Michigan author Bob Henige. A lifelong Michigan resident, he is the author of 3 books. His first book, Ned's, is an autobiographical account of the coming of age of a young man in 1970s Detroit. Redemption of Mr. Ben, his second book, is a novel and is called a gritty and deeply moving fictional tale of life on the streets of downtown Detroit. His latest book, Fantastic Sports Stuff, is a collection of rare and fascinating stories and facts, thought-provoking statistical analysis, great photos, and entertaining sports trivia questions, mostly about Michigan sports. Mr. Henige will be at the Warren Civic Center Library on Thursday, August 7th at 6 p.m. to discuss the writing of Fantastic Sports Stuff and some of his favorite stories he discovered while writing it. Mr. Henige, welcome to our program. It's a pleasure to have you today.
Thank you, John. Thank you for having me.
I'm very pleased to go and have you. Can I go and ask you just a little bit? Can you go and tell me about your background? Where did you grow up? Where did you go to school? Where did you work?
Well, I'm a lifelong East Sider. I grew up on the northeast side of Detroit near a large baseball complex called Jane Playfield, in which I spent my entire summers playing baseball out there. And I left Detroit. I've lived in Warren and Sterling Heights and Troy, and that's where I'm currently resided. So, lifelong East Sider.
Great. Well, what did you do as your occupation?
Before I went to Wayne State, I attended classes at the Detroit Business Institute, and I got involved with computers, and it's been my life. Today I'm a senior systems programmer for Trinity Health Services, and been a lifelong programmer on an IBM mainframe. I love it.
Oh, fantastic. So obviously, writing is something that is now that you are doing. Is it something that you've always done, or is this something that's relatively new?
I took some creative writing courses at Wayne State, and ever since then I've wrote different Christmas ditties at work and some tongue-in-cheek comments, and always been a very good technical writer. Mm-hmm. But I started my first book, Ned's. I waited until I was almost 50 years old in the year 2000, wrote that book, and I really haven't stopped since.
Oh, fantastic. Fantastic. We're here today to go and discuss your latest book, Fantastic Sports Stuff, but just like you alluded to, it's not your first book. Can you go and describe a little bit about your first books?
Well, Ned's is a coming-of-age story of a young man that's set against the gambling subculture of 1970s Detroit. There's a lot of experience. It's based on my life experiences, and it talks about the behind the scenes at the dice games, the card games, in the pool hall and at the track. There's an underlying theme there where those people are out there to take your money by any means. So mm-hmm. There's a lot of scams that there's pretty entertaining stories.
Yeah.
The second book, Redemption of Mr. Ben, it's a fictional story of 6 individuals on the streets of current-day downtown Detroit. And in one given day, their lives become intertwined and permanently changed. It's unique in that the inner thoughts of each character are italicized, so you get a good picture of where they've been and where they're at right now. A pretty gritty story. I'm very proud of it.
Was there any inspiration that led to the writing of that book?
Actually, after I read Ned's and I couldn't get the book published, I looked to writing some short stories, mm-hmm. and I came up with this idea of Mr. Ben, who's a bum who's sober for the first time in 20 years. Mm-hmm. I started to write a short story of him, but it grew into a novel. And some of the characters are based on the street people that I met when I worked downtown Detroit.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So you started off with a semi-autobiographical novel and then another novel about Detroit, and now you've gone in a completely different direction, mm-hmm. and have written now a non-fiction book, Fantastic Sports Stuff. This is your third book. Can you tell me a little bit about it?
Well, I got the idea. I first wrote Ned's, and then in between my time of writing Redemption of Mr. Ben, I was contracted to be a contributor for, I guess it could be described as a hard copy Wikipedia-like book called Michigan Companion. It had like 1,500 different subjects, short subjects of different things in Michigan. It covers pinconning cheese, Mackinac Island Bridge. It covers political figures, the Great Lakes. I was contracted to do the sports things. And the sports entries I came along, they were very short and encapsulated the information for something like Gordie Howe. You know, the book wanted to read about where he had played, how many years, his championships, his accomplishments, some of his family. But some of the rare things that happened to Gordie, especially before he became a Red Wing, those are the things that I kind of filed away. And when I was done with Redemption, I decided, you know, let's write a sports book. And I came up with, I think, a very unique format, and it just grew, and now we have fantastic sports stuff.
Oh, fantastic. A book of this nature, it's close to 500 pages. I mean, there is a lot of stuff in there. A lot of research went into it. What was the process of trying to go and uncover some of these stories that you have in the book, some of the statistics?
Well, I had a good base from the information that I had stored away from the Michigan Companion research. And it's funny, you want to double and triple check your work, and every time you hit a link to double check it, there was another link where more information came. In fact, the book continued to grow, and my wife Laura and my publisher Terry really threatened bodily harm if I didn't stop. So all of the other information that I came across, I filed it away in a fantastic sports
So
stuff.
that's going to be volume 2.
Who knows? Who knows? But it was just a lot of fun. In fact, I would be in the living room, and I'd find information about where the baseball sanitary got its start. It got its start because of medical reasons. I'd find this interesting fact. I'd run into the family room, tell my wife Laura, and she'd look at me and say, "Oh, that's great." And then I'd go back and do my work. You know, she would listen. But anyways, it was a lot of fun doing the research, and it's a lot of fun talking about it.
Was your research, was it primarily looking on like internet sources, or did you go and consult any archives, or?
Mostly internet sources. There's so much stuff out there that you could look at. You know, there is statistical reference sites for all 4 sports that are just terrific.
Yeah.
You can sort them out and break them down. And when you key on a particular fact, like when Gordie Howe was first signed by Detroit, he played for the Galt Junior Red Wings. And in his stats, he had played 1 game, but no minute, and he spent the whole year there. And I had a hard time trying to figure out exactly why. Until just before the publication, I found the answer in some obscure Canadian newspaper where it talked about how the Galt Junior Red Wing franchise had exceeded their import quota. And he was stuck for the year there, so he spent the whole year basically practicing not only on hockey, but it talked about his pugilistic abilities too. So I found that once I found that type fact, then I was able to verify it in a couple other sources.
Exactly.
So the internet's a pretty powerful thing.
Oh, fantastic. How long did this book go and take to write?
Really, all 3 of them took about 2 or 3 years.
Okay.
I've learned a lot since I started with Ned's. It's been over 13 years since I started. I just started to write, you know, about my personal experiences, and it was really neat to get in touch with some of the people that I hadn't seen in decades. And they explained some of the things that I, as a 21-year-old naive kid, didn't know about, some of the behind-the-scenes things that went on that I didn't know. But it took about 2 or 3 years, the same thing with Redemption and the same thing with fantastic sports stuff.
Wow, fantastic. Do you have any thoughts for anybody who themselves are trying to go and write any of their books?
You know, my friends have asked me, you know, what did it take? I said, really sit down and just write. There's a lot more to putting together a book of 60,000 words or something like fantastic sports stuff is 90 or 100. It's a lot harder to talk about a subject or a story than people think. But just start to write. And if you get to the point where you want your book published, just make sure it's fully edited. That's a mistake I made with Ned's. It wasn't professionally edited from the beginning, and it caused some concerns, you know, where we had to reload the book and republish it. So, but that's my advice. If you want to write, just start writing.
How did you find was it easy to go and get the book published, or did you have to go and do a lot of searching for that?
Well, I kept on giving my Word doc out about people to read it, and I just happened to run across an ex-softball adversary when I was working at the Farmington YMCA by the name of Mike McKeon. He read both books, he loved them, and he told me that he wanted to send them on to a friend of his, Terry, who was a publisher. I get a call from Terry, and in fact, in the exact same YMCA locker room, and it happened to be Terry Jimba, an old friend from high school who had moved to Grand Rapids we lost track of. And so he became my publisher at DPZ and Inc., and I've been with him ever since. And he's been a great proponent of my work.
Oh, wow. Wow. That's interesting how that small world just
that first break and, that open door. So.
Wow. Okay, we're going to go and take a brief moment, and then we'll be right back with author Bob Henige.
Know what?
What?
Since I got adopted, I've learned a lot about these humans.
I know. I mean, check out these two. It's Flirt City over here.
Yeah, I noticed that. It looks like my human is definitely into your human.
Oh, look! I think she's getting his number.
Nice.
Your human's got some sweet moves.
Takes after his dog. Oh, look, they're doing that thing where they put their arms around each other.
She kicked up a leg. It's like in the movies.
That's awesome. Looks like we're going to be hanging out a little bit more.
PAL was started in 1989 by a few of our officers in the Warren Police Department. It links the community with police officers.
We look always for coaches and adults in the area who want to help out with coaching some teams.
The best place to find out all the information is warrenpal.org, and we're also on Facebook at Warren Police Athletic League.
You get to go out, have fun, play some sports, you get a free t-shirt, and you get to hang out with a couple of the cool cops.
You can say with me, imagine what you'd see if every child had a book to read.
So the mission is for us to get a book to each and every child.
So let's join hands, book people unite, unearth hidden passion. Come on, we'll have a good time. One book could be the first little thing that helps to change a life. People unite.
Read to a child today and spark a lifetime of ambition.
And we're back with author Bob Henige, author of Fantastic Sports Stuff. What can you tell me, Bob, about the structure of this book?
Well, it's a type of book, as you said before, you can pick it up and read it for 20 minutes or 2 hours. It starts with a particular subject and it'll jump into something related. It might insert a quick fact. It might insert a trivia question, and the answers of the trivia question are at the end of the book. So if you want to look right away and get the answers, or you want to dwell and try to figure it out, it's entirely up to the reader. It contains over 160 photos, over 100 links, and someone with an e-book, someone told me that he went to read a 10-minute chapter and it took him over an hour because once he started clicking on the links and looking at all the information. And in fact, in the introduction, I dedicate the introduction to explaining how I've used a lot of these different websites in my research and what they're basically there for. So I try to give the reader an insight about how I configured the book and how I got the information.
Wow. What are, in researching the book, what are some of your favorite stories that you've come across? You already mentioned a little bit about Gordie Howe.
Yes.
What are some of the others?
Well, I start off, the first entry I asked the question, where would we be in the Michigan sports landscape without Barry, without Ty Cobb, without the captain, without Mr. Hockey, and without Bo? Each one of those individuals took a strange route to becoming a Michigan sports personality. With Barry Sanders, they wanted Tony Mandarich, but the Green Bay Packers took him. With Steve Yzerman, they wanted Pat LaFontaine, local Waterford guy, and the Islanders snatched him. And as a little aside, Steve Yzerman, according to ESPN, became the best 4th overall pick in the NHL history. Yeah. Ty Cobb they agreed with a handshake that he would be traded to Cleveland for a fellow by the name of Elmer Flick. And Detroit Cleveland at the last second rescinded that offer, and then Cobb went on to win like 9 out of the next 10 batting titles. Bo Schembechler, when Don Cannon became the GM, he turned to Joe Paterno. Paterno was set at Penn State. He's the one that told Cannon to look at a young coach at Miami of Ohio by the name of Bo Schembechler. And in that little entry about Bo, I do a lot of statistical research about the 10-year war between Ohio State and Michigan, which was a classic. I mean, the average score was like 12-10. So as you can see, it's 3 yards in a cloud of dust. Gordie is the most interesting because He was discovered by a ranger scout on the lakes of Saskatchewan. So when they offered him a spot at their tryout in Winnipeg, he had no equipment. He had to borrow some from his relatives, some from the New York Ranger organization. And when he went to the tryout, he had to watch the veterans put it. He didn't know how to put on hockey equipment. I mean,
wow.
that's hard to believe about Mr. Hockey. And when he was there, some of the veterans treated him poorly. They stole his lunch, and then some of the older, more established players told him to leave him alone. But it didn't go well.
Yeah.
The Wings signed him. He spent that year in Galt, and then he ended up in Omaha. Now, he played for the Omaha Knights, their minor league affiliate. And his only year there, Frank Selke Sr., the Montreal general manager, he was on a scouting trip. He wanted to look at the Omaha players, and he watched this tall, skinny young kid by the name of Howe just skate circles, and he found out that he was on the unprotected list.
Okay.
So if it would have been any other team but the Wings, he would have drafted him, and he would have been a Montreal Canadian.
Wow.
But he was real good friends with the Detroit manager, Adams, general manager, and on the way back to Montreal, he stopped over and says, look, either you put him on the protected list or we're going to grab him. So he took him for his word, put him on the protected list, and Howe remained a Red Wing.
Wow, that's amazing.
The funny thing, to show you how the book is structured, it goes on to talk about the coach. Gordy played 1 year in Omaha. He went to the Wings. He became Mr. Hockey. The following year, Tommy Ivan, his coach, the person that left him off the protected list, he followed and became a Hall of Fame coach, winning 3 Stanley Cups. But one of the more intriguing stories I found, their goalie was a fellow by the name of Lefty Wilson. And Lefty Wilson played a couple more years as a minor league goaltender and joined the Red Wings and spent decades as their trainer. But back in those days, there was only one goaltender. There was no backup goaltender. So Lefty Wilson was the backup goaltender for both the Wings and the visiting teams when games were played at Olympia. And I saw this, I read about this, and I said, you know what? I went out to Hockey Reference, and sure enough, he appeared in 3 games. He was 3-0. He played once for the Wings, and he played once for Toronto and once for the Rangers, and beat Detroit in both of those games. So that just goes to show you the format of the book, how it goes off in different tangents, even though it's related.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I definitely liked about it is you are, like you mentioned too, if you did have the ebook edition, being able to, it just goes and leads you down the rabbit hole. You know, you just start at one spot and then you just keep on going and going and going, and how you go and take a story and how you go and you expand it.
Yeah, that's
from there.
I really like the way some of the things get tied in, and having that link there. It's up to the reader if he wants to, further investigate things. And there's some video links there. McCarty's fight with Lemieux. Oh, I wasn't supposed to mention his name. And I get into some of the things about Secretariat and how great a horse he was, and there's a link to some of his races. Yeah. But it's for an ebook reader, it's really a wealth of information.
I like also some of the things that you went and have in your book too. Some of the pictures that you have, I think that's one of the neat things that is in here. A picture of Willie Horton in his high school days back from 1959, a program cover from a Detroit Pistons playoff game that was played at Grosse Pointe High School.
Yeah, they played at Grosse Pointe in 1960, opening round of the playoffs, first game against the Minneapolis Lakers. It was nationally televised, but the ice capades were at the Olympia. So they had to play, and I found some really good articles where they actually interview one of the kids that played on the Grosse Pointe High School basketball team, and he was a gopher for all these professional NBA players as idols, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
A lot of other things like that has a link to the full story that I used to put the article together, and again, it's there for the reader if he wants.
That's neat. I mean, there's just a ton of stuff in this. Like I was, mentioning to you before the interview started, it's a perfect book. You just pick it up and you do kind of just go and, all of a sudden, wow, an hour's gone by as you're just going and reading more and more and more and really getting into it.
Well, looking at Willie Horton, and they just won the city championship, and as a 16-year-old catcher, he had just hit a 450-foot home run that landed in the upper field bleachers at Tiger Stadium. So that was definitely a preview of his power.
Yeah.
So that was a cool photo. There's a couple other photos. There's one of George Papa Bear Halas as a New York Yankee, believe it or not. He spent 1 year as a professional baseball player before he formed the Bears. And there's another picture of Casey Stengel. His first time he was hired as a baseball manager was with the Toledo Mudhens.
Yeah, the Toledo Mudhens.
And there's a picture of him with a Toledo Mudhens jersey. There's a lot of cool photos.
That's really neat. Do you have any other books that are you currently writing anything?
Right now, I'm just in the beginning stages of my fourth book. It's a story about actually a high school classmate of mine that was unjustly convicted and subsequently incarcerated for a crime that he didn't commit. His name is Henige. Fascinating person. It's going to go into the misconduct of some of the system that put him in jail. It's going to get into his exoneration because of DNA, and also the fact that they caught the actual perpetrator later. It's really a fascinating book. It's a great story.
When do you think that one will be coming out?
That'll probably take about 3 years.
Another 3 years, okay.
I still got a day job, unfortunately.
Well, you've always, definitely got something you can go and, when you retire, it's something you can definitely go and do. Where could people go and purchase your books?
Right now, my books are available at my website, www.bobhenige.com. You can purchase ebooks or paperbacks of all three books. There's a synopsis and there's a ton of excerpts, so if you're interested in a book, you'll get a real good flavor of what the book is all about. As a promotional for the book presentation at Warren Library, we offer a 20% discount with a 20% discount promo code for anybody that wants to visit the website, whether it be ebook or paperback. And that promotional code is Library20, really inventive.
All right, well, Library20, so you heard it here. What are, just going back, you mentioned something that's kind of that I'm interested in. I go and not only am I the supervisor at the library, I also go and manage our ebook collections. And you mentioned one of your readers who's read the ebook and goes and clicks on all the links. What do you prefer print or do you prefer ebooks? And with your sales of your book, how have print books been selling better, or have you been seeing your ebooks selling well?
Well, mostly the sales have been with printed copy, with hard copy. I prefer hard copy, but in this day and age, it's all about convenience, and technically the world's advancing every minute. I know a lot of people, both young and old, who prefer ebooks.
Yeah, it's I think with this format, with the links, I think it works great as an ebook.
Yes.
However, just a casual pick up and put down book, it's almost the printed book's almost a little bit better. But both are great. I can't go and let you get out of here, though, without discussing a little bit about some of the current sports stuff. We just went and passed the Tigers. The Major League Baseball trade deadline was yesterday. Tigers made a major move. We went and we got David Price from the Rays. We gave up Austin Jackson and also Drew Smyly. What are your thoughts about that? And also the thoughts of us going and making and finally sealing the deal this year with the World Series championship?
Well, I think the trade... Tampa Bay and Seattle will be judged on what happens in the future. Detroit and Oakland will be judging what happens this year. That's for sure. Tigers aren't without flaws. I think they got a great chance to win the World Series. There's no doubt about that. They got a great pitching staff. They can score some runs. I hope they do it. But Dombrowski is going to be judged by whether they get that World Series ring or not. That's my opinion. But Detroit's my favorite sports team, so I'll be rooting for them whether David Price is pitching or Purcell or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And also, I guess there's, sometimes we don't want to talk about it, but it's another Lions season coming up here, and I know we've got a new coaching regime in there, and this time, everybody goes, hope springs eternal around the time of the draft, and now training camp's starting. What's going to happen?
Before I answer that question, I want to preface it with a story.
Okay.
When my son Mason, my youngest son Mason, was about 10 or 11, we were at the dining room table, and with my wife and his mom, Laura, and because the subject came up about the Lions, how they're going to do, and I said, Mason, what does SOL mean? And my wife, Laura, she thought it was something a little different. But I says, what does SOL mean? And he said, same old Lions, Dad. So while I think they've improved that general manager with Mayhew. I think they got a better coach with Caldwell. But, fool me once thing. I guess my official answer would be I'm cautiously optimistic about them being relatively heard from in 2014. That's my answer, I guess.
I've got, You know, you hope it's bad when you go and you look and you're hoping for, all right, 9 and 7 and hopefully just get in, you know, but we'll go and we'll see what happens with that as the season goes and progresses. I'd like to go and definitely go and thank you for coming here today. It's greatly appreciated. Again, the book that we're discussing is fantastic sports stuff. It's author Bob Henige's third book. His first book is Ned's. His second book is The Redemption of Mr. Ben. Bob will be at the Warren Civic Center Library on Thursday, August 7th at 6 p.m., where he will be going and discussing more about his book, the writing process of his book, and also he'll be sharing a lot more stories that he couldn't go and share today regarding his book. I know you also have several other appearances. If you're not able to make the 7th, you have appearances coming up at the Troy Library.
Yeah, all the information will be at my website. In the fall, we're going to Detroit, be appearing at the Troy Library and also at Macomb Community College at this point. So that's coming up within the next couple of months.
Excellent. We will be, this is again part of our continuing author series here at the Warren Public Library. We will be having more as more authors go and speak at the library. And I'd like to also, at this time, I'd like to encourage everybody to go and visit one of the branches of the Warren Public Library. We have 4 branches, and we do have a lot of different programs taking place at each. For more about the library and its programs, we encourage you to stop by any branch. You can also visit us on our website at www.warrenlibrary.net, or you can also go and like us on Facebook at facebook.com/Warren Public Library.